Greetings, salutations, and whatever form of greeting you like to go with. It is League Unlock. That is Mark. My name is Eric, and it is time for the first global power rankings of the summer split. You know how these go. They get a little bit messy because there's games every single day, so you're not really sure what week you want to call it because every major region is basically on a different week. But we are going 20 to 1 today. It's everybody's favorite time, Mark.
Gotta love getting power rankings. Everybody loves it because if your team is high up in the power rankings, you get to say, hey, how strong we're doing over here. And then if you don't agree with it, you get to go, hey, these guys are idiots. So everybody wins when you get the power rankings rolling.
Remember, the beautiful thing with the rankings is everyone's right. Everyone's right. Nobody's wrong. Whatever the opinion, everybody is right. You're entitled to it, and let's dive into it.
You're only wrong if you've got more than one North American team in your top 20. I'll tell you that much right out of the gates. If you got more than that, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, the spoilers are, e.g., Team Liquid, FlyQuest, sorry boys, you're not cracking the top 20 when the LPL, the LEC, and the LCK have such talented teams. Maybe, you know what, you're throwing them maybe that 22 to 24 range. You can throw those 3-1 squad teams from North America. But number 20 on our list is the Africa Freaks. They had a 2-0 start to the week, or to their season, but it wasn't against the toughest competition, which is why they are in at number 20. 19 and 18, it's EDG and World Elite, and World Elite beat EDG way back in week 1, so you might say, how are they behind them? But still think that EDG is the stronger team overall.
I think so as well, but the real story for me is Victory 5 finding themselves ahead of these organizations, and that's really a really big surprise given how bad things were for them in the spring split, like historic levels of being bad in the spring split. So to turn it around here in summer and show this level of form, get here in the power rankings early on. I know it's very early, and I expect this to change, but you got to give them props where it's due right now to climb this high into the rankings.
Yeah, and the reason, listen, they're 4-1, which is second best record in the LPL. The reason they're not higher is the teams that they have beaten are Vici, OMG, BLG, and Demo. You're arguing that's like the 4 worst teams in China right now, but hey, they beat them all. They dropped the game to LGD. They're one game away, or one series win away from tying their total win total from the last 2 splits. Not just last split, from 2019 summer and 2020 spring. They won 5 series total.
Yeah, it certainly is an impressive turnaround, and that's where got to give them their props. But you're right about the other squads below them in this list as well. Certainly getting out to the starts that you would like to, or at least positive starts for the summer split from these organizations, and showing a little bit of that form, showing kind of those things that we think can make them special teams. Just need to see a little bit more.
Then we're followed by a couple of EU teams in 16-15, Origin and Rogue. Rogue has the slightly better record, but they've had a much easier schedule. They lost to G2 in pretty convincing fashion, and their wins against Vitality, Schalke, Misfits, and XL. Now, Vitality looks much better than they did last split, but still on the easier end of the spectrum. But for Origin, I mean, they're dropping games to SK and Misfits, who haven't looked great. So because of how dominant Rogue did look, they get the nod, 1 spot ahead of OG.
At the peak, OG has looked really strong and has shown us that play that you want from Origin. But you're right, it hasn't been nearly consistent enough in this small sample size that is already the summer split out in the LEC. And for Rogue, this is really the question now for them is how much can you step up? Because again, we've seen this from them in the past. We've seen you be able to beat the Vitalities, the Schalkes, those type of squads in the LEC. We've seen you be able to prove that you're better. But now it's time to prove that you can fight and, really get into it with the top level squads in the LEC. And that's what's going to be waiting to see the rest of this year, the growth that they need to show.
Yeah, first test wasn't great against G2. Number 14, you have Damwon, who maybe looked the cleanest of all the LCK teams in week 1. The only problem is they beat up on Sandbox and Seoul Prince, the renamed APK Prince, who... Sandbox looked like the worst team after week 1. So not the strongest competition, but I'm excited to see Damwon looking good again. Invictus Gaming is in at number 13. IG, we saw them go head to head with LGD, who were a couple spots ahead of them because of that head to head win. It was a very close series. The issues remain the same for IG, but against LGD in that third game, it was a rare time that Rookie got caught and ended up costing the game. You don't see that happen often.
That does not happen very often from him. And when you're thinking about IG and you're thinking about having them at 13 in the power rankings, it's a very interesting position given that, look, they've shown us and what you expect and can demand actually from this IG roster, given what they've shown us in the past. You can demand higher levels of performance, better spots in these rankings, given what you expect them to be able to do. But at the same time, to be at 13 and to go through the struggles that they have had already this, the end of spring and now summer split, certainly shows the real strengths that you still have with this lineup and the power that IG carries as a brand.
And what was surprising in the loss to LGD was we finally saw the Shy play something like Quinn, and he was dominating. He was getting solo kills. He was up 40 plus CS on the Renekton, what we're expecting to see, and they still lost the game. So maybe that's a little bit concerning. IG is still going to be a top tier team, but they're sorting a lot of issues out right now, which is why they're outside of that top 10 and even behind a team like Mad Lions, who are the third highest EU team on this list. 4-1, they've won 4 games in a row, only dropped that first game to G2, still feel like they have the highest potential, highest ceiling, and should be the front runners for that third seed out of Europe.
It's so exciting watching this Mad Lions squad in the LEC this year because there's always a lot of stories to keep your eye on, a lot of stories that can get you feeling pretty happy. But this Mad Lions roster, 4 rookies coming through, putting up the performances that they do, the attitudes that they have towards the game and how they've practiced. You love to see these type of things, and they're getting rewarded on the Rift with their performances and keeps shining through, and they're developing even better their own personality and play style, which is something, of course, not only League of Legends, but especially the LEC scene can always use more of and always is a good reflection.
And Humanoid continues to make his case as probably the third best or a top 3 mid laner in Europe in what is a stacked pool of talent. So kudos to him. LGD are the final squad on this first board, and we kind of talked about them going head-to-head to IG. So far, these offseason moves have looked great, and Peanut is playing like a top 3 jungler in China.
And man, people are saying, why didn't Peanut go to the LPL a lot sooner? This is exactly the league that suits the type of play style and aggression that he can bring to a squad and fully utilize it on these teams. And that's exactly what you're seeing with LGD, but you put it right. The changes that they made, the acquisitions that you made in the offseason, working out pretty darn well. And the play from all facets of LGD's roster is really firing on all cylinders.
The only game that they've dropped this year, or series that they've dropped, is to top. And spoilers, guys, everybody's dropping games to top. But the first 10 on this list, absolutely stacked with LPL talent, and that theme continues when you get to the top 10. Looking at that top 10, it is it's familiar to what we saw last year, where it was Fnatic and C9 almost always jockeying for position. They were always in very similar spots. You have the arguments either way from NA and EU fans. And again, I think it's very close, but because of how Fnatic played last week, Cloud9 should be a spot ahead of them. I know North America's bad. There's no other NA teams, but we can't continue to punish Cloud9 and have them outside of the top 10 or anything. They've done all that you could possibly ask of a team in a bad region.
And you talk about these two organizations, these two Western teams, and I'm just thinking to myself, man, you know what? Fnatic, yes, they didn't have the best of weekends this past one. A couple little slip-ups, but nothing obviously major that makes you really say, oh boy, I think the wheels are going to fall off here type of situation. But there's no way you could see that week and put them ahead of Cloud9 in the form that they've continued to show from spring through summer. They are the dominant kings of North America. And look, their play this summer hasn't been to the absolute peaks that we saw yet in spring. So there is another level that these guys can get to and still elevate that level of play. You got to be respectful of Cloud9, even if they're heading out from the for fun North America region.
And Nemesis does need to be a little bit better for Fnatic if they want to climb higher up on this list. For now, a spot behind Cloud9. Gen G comes in at number 8, and really, they lost to Dragon X in somewhat convincing fashion. I know that they took a game off them, and they probably should have lost to KT. They definitely could have lost to KT Rolster. So not a ton of confidence in Gen G right now, which is why they find themselves at number 8, which is obviously still within the top 10. But this is a team that was top 5 the majority of spring.
Top 5, and that's the expectations, and this roster is built to be a top 5 level team in the world, and that is obviously a disappointment when you look at them being here. And of course, again, being inside the top 10, pretty darn good in the world, but you're not cutting it if you're Gen G and you're hoping to be the very best of the best and you're here. You still need to step up the performance, because when you're talking about what you want to be achieving, we're going to start talking about these squads and how strong they are and what they've been putting out. Gen G has not been able to stack up.
And if they didn't come away with that narrow victory against KT, then you're probably talking about them outside top 10 with a 0-2 start to summer. Number 7 is JDG, another team that was always in the top 5 to close out the spring split, but they've been a bit of a slow start in summer. And yes, some of it is because they had to play top and RNG in their first couple of series. RNG, I think, playing a lot better than people would have anticipated coming into this split without Uzi. But JDG, they haven't looked like the same level of dominant, even against Dominus, the last team that they played. Sure, they 2-0'd them because they're a terrible team, but they were behind 2K plus in both of those games in the early game. So not the same level of consistency we've seen out of the lads.
The way that we've seen them move around the map and the coordination from JDG was not the same this summer split that we have seen. Even in the midseason cup, it wasn't up to that level. So that is certainly something that I think you can ask more from JDG and say, look, we know that you're able to hit these levels of performance. We need to see it. That is certainly going to be the ask right now, because look, as you said it, RNG is certainly a squad that is putting together a really hot start to summer and is going to be pushing for those spots to worlds from the LPL. And if you're a squad like this, you got to be thinking, we need to hold our own. We need to fight for our spot and keep it. So it certainly is going to be one where you hope that they turn that performance back to the levels that they were when they were winning that championship in spring.
Yeah, and I think now it's kind of flipped to where Yagao might be the biggest question mark on this roster going up against, because like most positions in the LPL, mid lane is incredibly stacked, especially at the top end. So if you want to be vying for a championship in China, you have to beat Knight, you have to beat Rookie, you have to beat Do and B. Well, that's pretty tough to take down any of those 3 guys. So even if you're talking about Yagao as a liability on this roster, it's in direct comparison to those 3 guys.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really the point, is that when you talk about Yagao, one of the things that you want him compared to the other LPL mid laners is you just hope that he gets through kind of the first couple of minutes of the laning phase not too far behind, because once you get to, mid-game point in time, the way that Yagao is going to move around and perform in those team fights, that's where he really is such a strength for this squad. So to get there, that's the big difference. But the problem is, as you said it, you got a lot of hungry mid lane sharks looking to make a nice tasty mincemeat sandwich out of you before you even get to mid game.
And there's still not enough games to fully judge JDG in the summer split, at least. So we'll monitor them as the split goes on. But for now, they're in at number 7. Number 6 is a fall out of the top 5. That's the theme here. T1. Listen, we're talking number 1 in the world, or top 2 coming into the mid-season cup, and me oh my, did that hype die quickly. If you're including performances from there, which we kind of are, that was an incredibly disappointing run from them. The start to summer been a little disappointing as well. First they dropped to Dragon X, and then they match up against Hanwha Life, a team, doesn't matter who the players are, they always struggle against Hanwha Life, and they came away with the win in game 3. It was pretty convincing, but it wasn't fully confidence instilling that series win.
This is one of those ones where I know people are going to overreact to having T1 here at number 5. And I just want to say, my brothers, my sisters, my T1 fans, calm down. It's okay. This is the first one coming through. And you got to be able to have the ability to reflect on this past week and say, yeah, DRX, you came into this series and you did play relatively okay, but you can still come away with it saying that DRX handily took that victory. And then when you look at the Hanwha Life series, as you said it, that is a squad that you have historically struggled against. And yes, you did come away in the game 3 eventually with a very clean, strong performance to get the series victory. But it's not enough that you can really be saying, look, I'm proud of what T1 has put out together this week. That's not, I think, the expectations and levels of play that T1 fans or as an organization should be looking for. So 5 in the world, pretty good, but still got the sights aimed higher for T1.
And the expectations are incredibly high because they are T1, the most storied franchise in the history of the game, but also just how good they looked in spring and heading into the midseason cup, how dominant they were in the finals. You were expecting more of the same in summer, so there's been a bit of a change. I'm sure they'll get back to that top tier form and be vying for their 4th straight title in the LCK. But for now, they're just outside of where you would expect them to be in that number 6 spot. And the LCK and LPL have dominated this list. So is the LEC. Listen, when NA only has one team, there's a lot of teams from those other regions. But the top 5, there are a couple of faces we aren't familiar with being so high up. When we look at that top 5, it is... Well, there are some of the teams that you're accustomed to seeing. Top's been around for a while. G2's always here. But RNG in the top 5 is one of the bigger surprises for me. With no Uzi, we saw Cryan come over. They've had a new top laner named New, who's a rookie. And Xiao Long Bao has been the standout performer so far for them early in summer. But they've beaten JDG already. They took down E-Star, who I know isn't the same level team as last year. But the one loss is to LNG. I'm almost throwing that out as an anomaly because them and FPX both had a crazy loss to them. But RNG has looked better than people were expecting.
They've looked fantastic is the word that you should be using for how well that they have played and performed in their matches. You said it, Xiao Long Bao. That is the name that people got to be remembering. We talked about him in the spring split and again coming into this position as a young guy. This was a big role to step in and fill in and perform really well. Again, taking over for no slouch himself, Karsa, of course, definitely big shoes to fill. And he has absolutely stepped up and delivered those performances. There was some level of inconsistency in the spring. You haven't seen that so far in summer. And yes, very early still in summer, but it's the LPL and they play a lot of games and it's been going on for a couple of weeks already now. So more than any other region, I'm willing to buy into some of this hype and continued play from Xiao Long Bao with RNG because he really has been one of those star points for them in getting this results.
And the beauty is, Xiaohu has looked pretty good through their first handful of series, and we saw that last split as well. There were big stretches where he was playing at an MVP level. Now, though, when he does slip up and doesn't start performing well, they just say, all right, this is the slump. Get him out. Cry and get in there. They have this absolutely more than capable backup. I didn't even think he should be the backup, but Xiaohu's been playing, so they have that option in the mid lane if Xiaohu does start struggling. So we did write off RNG from Worlds early, but maybe there's a chance if IG continues to struggle. Still hard-pressed to see that. The number 4 spot goes to G2. Listen, they're 3-2. They don't have the best record in the LEC. They went 2-0 this week. Week 1, it just didn't look like the same team. There was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, some personal stuff with Perks. I'm going to account some of that. But this, they got right back on track. They hand Rogue their first loss of the split, and they did it in classic G2 fashion by absolutely styling on them.
I think you're right. Week 1 has got to be looked at it as an anomaly for a lot of different reasons. As you said, Perks had personal stuff going on with his family issues and everything else with as far as then the preparation from the G2 coaching staff was apparently not up to the level needed. These are the type of things that you had going on in week 1, and it led to obviously not the performances and the record now for G2 that are not where you would expect, let alone someone this high up in the rankings. But you talk about the performance, the eyeball test, you watch these matches. That's the old G2. It only takes those 2 games for you to see and to realize, look, it's back in function, it's back moving, and it's going to be ready to dominate the rest of the LEC. I'm warning you guys in the LEC, you be prepared for this week because G2 are ready to go and they are perfectly informed to keep continuing what they do.
Yeah, you should still be terrified of them if you are the rest of Europe. FPX is number 3, and it's a classic case of they just haven't played enough games. They've only played 3 series. A lot of the other LPL teams have played 5. They had, just like RNG, a terrible loss to LNG, but they looked good at the mid-season cup, even though TES smashed them TES is number one. They're smashing everybody. But Fun Plus has looked, Con has looked great in the top lane, and that's one of the main reasons they stick in the top 3. They play IG on Thursday, so that's the first big test they'll have had in the summer split.
It'll be a big one for both IG and FPX. Really excited for that matchup. But you said it, Con. That is the name you got to be remembering with FPX right now. We had all of our stories about the super carry doing B last year. Tian coming through with the big time performance in the finals, and LWX, of course, with his damage. Don't forget about Con up in that top side, because, man, he is absolutely putting in work right now. And this is a player that's been dogged with inconsistency in his performances, not showing up enough on the international stage. There's been, for a player of his level of, performance and level of play that he's able to put out, I'm surprised at the level of hate and, not enough support that I think Khan gets from this community as far as his performances go. And he is leveling up big time with FPX right now. And I'm excited to see that continue.
It's scarier when the world champs get a little bit better. Top 2, TES and Dragon X. DRX, all they did was beat Gen G and T1 in their first 2 matches. Sure, it took 3 games. They might have thrown a game against T1, but they look like they're reaching their ceiling even faster than we've expected in this first year with Courier and Piosic. They look like the best team in the LCK right now, and I would be terrified of matching up against them. But TES is another tier right now. From every other team in the world, it doesn't matter if Knight is playing Karma mid, he's going to build Majais, and he's going to get 25 stacks. That's it.
Before I get to top, I'm going to just say one thing about DRX, which is really scary to consider them at number 2 in this list. And you talk about Kyria. I think Kyria, right now, is one of the best supports in the world at the age of 17. And I think the scary thing is after Summer Split, he might be the very best player in that position in the world. And that is a dangerous thought for the side of DRX, pairing him alongside, of course, Deft in the bot lane. And they're going to need it, because you said it, number 1 is top esports. In that bottom lane, you got Jackie Love down there, you got Karsa in the jungle, and you got your boy carrying big time Mr. Knight in the mid lane. Oh boy, top esports is a special squad, and they are especially number 1 in the power rankings.
Jackie Love and Knight both have 4 player of the games already, which is tied for first. So they might be stealing MVP votes from each other for the entire split. But Jackie Love looks like he hasn't missed a beat since his best ever performances on IG. This might be the best he's ever looked, including his time on IG.
And that's incredible to say, because, look, this is the youngest, most accomplished ADC in the LPL region. And, of course, you have the historical god figure of Uzi raining down in that bot lane, Jackie Love taking up right after him. And you got to say, these performances, the way that he's still continuing to play, it's like Jackie Love's got the spirit of Uzi blessing him at his side.
Yeah, and that could be the case, because he's talked about praising him after spending so much time with Baolon. So Uzi got a lot of respect for Jackie Love as well. And 369, by the way, is now the best top laner in the LPL. That's it.
He's been a monster for them. That's been a big difference maker as well. And again, that's one of those ones where it goes under the radar because of how strong and how well the rest of the top squad is playing.
TES is number 1 on the rankings. That's it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you guys. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you on that flippity.